I watched in disbelief as the tow truck hauled away my tractor, the heart of my farm. Clara Patterson, the
Did you really
HOA
think I wouldn't
president,
find
had
you?
pulled some
I
strings
knew you
using
would.
every legal loophole she could find to have my equipment towed during planting season. She thought she had won until I saw her parked right on my property, flaunting her Rolls-Royce like it was a trophy. I had a plan though. The soil was ready, and her car perfectly positioned. By morning, she'd learn the hard way what happens when you mess with a farmer during planting season. Clara Patterson didn't just move to the neighborhood, she invaded it. The day she showed up with her shiny HOA binder and perfectly manicured nails, she made it clear she wasn't here for peace. As the HOA president, she wielded her power like a weapon, picking at every little flaw in our property, from lawn length to mailbox placement. I'd lived here my whole life, but this woman was determined to make sure my family didn't belong anymore. She was smart, methodical, like a lawyer in disguise, taking notes on everything, measuring distances, and snapping photos. I caught her one afternoon, crouched in front of my tractor, measuring its distance from the fence like she was preparing for a lawsuit. "Just making sure everything's up to code," she said with that fake smile. But I saw it in her eyes, she wasn't just interested in the rules. She was after something bigger. I knew she had an agenda. The whispers around town were already circulating. Clara wasn't just a hard-nosed HOA president, she was a woman with a plan. By April 19th, I realized what that plan was. She was targeting me, and my tractor was just the beginning. This wasn't some petty neighbor dispute. Clara had come here with the sole purpose of pushing out anyone who didn't fit into her vision of the neighborhood, starting with me. But she made one crucial mistake she didn't account for: how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. It started small, an odd note on my porch, a quiet complaint about the way I stored my tractor overnight. At first, I brushed it off as the usual HOA nonsense. But Clara wasn't like the others. She was methodical, precise. Her complaints became more frequent, more detailed. One morning, I found another notice taped to my door, this time about the position of my mailbox. According to her, it was out of compliance with HOA regulations. A ridiculous claim, but I knew she wouldn't stop there. A few days later, as I was finishing some repairs on my irrigation system, I spotted her again, Clara, standing by the property line with her phone out, snapping pictures. She wasn't just taking random shots. No, she was documenting my every move. She even crouched down to get a close-up of my tractor's serial number. I walked over, trying to keep things civil. "Clara, what's this about?" I asked, wiping dirt from my hands. "Oh, just documenting the rural lifestyle for a project," she replied quickly, waving her phone dismissively. But I could see the edge in her eyes. This wasn't some casual hobby. She was collecting information, my information. My blood started to boil. Something told me she wasn't just trying to be a good neighbor, she was building a case. By the end of the week, Clara's behavior crossed the line. I was out checking the fields when I saw her again, this time on my driveway. She was standing next to my truck, taking photos of the oil stains on the ground beneath it. Environmental concerns, she claimed when I confronted her. "Environmental concerns?" I asked, incredulous. "That truck's been leaking 3 drops of oil for 15 years. You're wasting your time." But Clara wasn't backing down. "I have to report anything that might be a violation," she said, her voice icy, calculating. I could tell she was enjoying this. She was already building her narrative, and it had nothing to do with farming or any real violations. This was personal. The following day, I saw her parked at the end of her driveway, sitting in her car with the interior light on. Papers were spread out on the passenger seat, and her phone was pressed to her ear. I could catch fragments of the conversation: abandoned vehicle, commercial equipment, residential zone. My suspicion deepened. Clara was planning something, and I wasn't just dealing with a difficult neighbor anymore. This was a woman who knew how to use the system against me. Then came the blow I wasn't expecting. On April 19th, I was out in the back fields when I received a call from the county clerk. The message was clear: "We've received a complaint. Your tractor is in violation of county zoning laws and will be towed unless it's removed within 48 hours. I stood there stunned. I had no idea this was coming. But Clara had orchestrated it all, her carefully gathered evidence, the timing, the legal loopholes. I drove over to the impound lot the next day to see my tractor sitting there covered in dust, locked away like it was just another abandoned vehicle. I paid the fees, but it was the lost time that hurt the most. Those 2 days were critical. In farming, the planting window is short, and once it's gone, it's gone. Those days spent dealing with paperwork and fees, they were gone forever, and I couldn't get them back. To make matters worse, I found Clara's car parked on my land later that afternoon, right where my tractor had been the night before. She was posing for selfies like she'd won some kind of victory. My blood boiled. Not only had she stolen my tractor, but now she was celebrating her triumph on my family's land. This was no longer just about a tractor, it was about something bigger. Clara wasn't just a neighbor, she was trying to erase my family's history. As if it couldn't get worse, Clara escalated things even further. She called the police, claiming I had been violating HOA rules and threatening her property. The sheriff showed up at my door the next morning. I tried to keep my cool, but I was livid. Clara's accusations were ridiculous. She'd been trespassing, and I was the one who was being harassed, but no one seemed to care. The deputy, a guy I'd known for years, walked over to my tractor, which had just been returned from the tow lot. Clara was standing nearby, arms crossed, watching like it was all some sort of game. She pulled out her phone and started recording. "Do you mind explaining this?" the deputy asked me. I tried to explain the situation calmly, but the officer had already taken one look at Clara's evidence. It was clear she had been building a case for weeks. I couldn't believe this was happening. Clara was twisting the narrative, and the authorities were buying it. The worst part, it wasn't just my tractor that was at risk. She was trying to make it look like I was the one who had done something wrong. By the time Clara made her next move, I had reached my breaking point. She took it one step too far when she parked her $400,000 luxury car right in the middle of my field. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was flaunting her victory, as if this was all just a game. But it wasn't a game for me. This was my family's land, my livelihood. She was standing on the edge of the field, waving at her phone camera, narrating her victory for her social media followers. I watched from my porch, helpless and furious. I knew what I had to do. There was no way I was going to let her continue this charade. I wasn't going to sit back while she destroyed my life for the sake of a few legal loopholes. And as I sat there looking at her standing on my property like she owned it, I felt something snap inside me. Tomorrow, Clara Patterson would learn just how far I was willing to go. Morning broke with a thin sheet of fog rolling over the field, but even the mist couldn't hide Clara's luxury car sitting dead center on my land. I walked toward it, boots sinking into the soft soil, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Clara was already outside, wearing a silk robe and fury in her eyes, pacing around her car like she'd discovered a crime scene. "What did you do to my property?" she screamed, the moment she saw me. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at the deep, perfectly even furrows that surrounded her tires, furrows that I had plowed the night before. Legally, as part of soil preparation. Neighbors had gathered near the road. The sheriff's SUV pulled up. Clara's volume doubled. "He vandalized my car. He attacked it with farm equipment. This is a felony." She shoved her phone in the sheriff's face, trembling with outrage. I finally spoke. Calm, controlled, dead serious. "Sheriff, her car is illegally parked 8 feet onto my property. I conducted normal soil preparation for planting season. Any damage or sinking," I gestured at her car, now swallowed halfway by the earth, "is a result of her trespassing." The sheriff looked at the ground at the boundary markers, then at Clara, and for the first time since she arrived, her confidence cracked. The sheriff held up a hand. "Let's back up. Gavin, show me your markers." I guided him to the stone boundary posts my grandfather set decades ago, still straight as ever. Clara followed, still fuming, but now quieter. "Less certain." "GPS matches," the sheriff muttered. "She's on your land." I pulled out a folder of time-stamped photos from the night before. Pictures of Clara's car already on my property. Pictures of me performing soil prep around it, standard legal necessary agricultural work. Then I handed him the kicker, a printed copy of the county's own agricultural protection statutes. "Soil preparation," I said, tapping the page, "is legally protected, even if someone decides to park where they shouldn't." The sheriff read for a few seconds, then closed the folder with a sigh. "Ma'am," he said, turning to Clara, "not only is your car trespassing, but this farmer is fully within his agricultural rights. He didn't damage your property intentionally. You parked on an active field." Clara's face drained of color. Her hands trembled. This is insane. You can't let him get away with this," she shouted. But the truth sat there in the open, undeniable. Her live streams documenting her victory, her bragging about forcing my tractor tow, her car parked on my land. She had built her own destruction, and everyone watching knew it. By noon, the mud had tightened its grip on her car, dragging it deeper as the sun warmed the soil. A tow truck arrived, ironically the same company she'd used to take my tractor. The driver took one look at the situation and immediately shook his head. "Lady, this'll take hours, maybe days. Soil this deep? You're basically parked in quick cement." Clara looked ready to implode. How much she demanded. He hesitated. "With this kind of extraction, minimum 8 grand. She staggered as if slapped. Behind us, neighbors whispered. Someone took photos. Someone else laughed under their breath. The mighty HOA president, the woman who weaponized rules, fines, and bureaucracy, had humiliated herself with her own arrogance. The sheriff approached her again, voice firm now. You trespassed. You initiated the towing of agricultural equipment under false pretenses, and now you're obstructing normal farm operations. There will be citations, possibly charges. Clara's lips trembled. You can't do this to me. I stepped forward, not gloating, just standing my ground. You did this to yourself, I said quietly. She turned away, shoulders shaking as the tow crew began digging trenches around her sinking luxury car. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Clara Patterson understood she wasn't the one in control anymore. By the time the tow crew finished their third failed attempt to pull Clara's car from my field, the sun was dipping low, and the whole neighborhood had gathered like it was the county fair. People brought folding chairs, someone brought popcorn, and I finally felt my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. Clara stood off to the side, her silk robe stained with mud, her phone forgotten in her hand. She wasn't live streaming anymore. She wasn't lecturing. She wasn't even speaking. She just watched as her own actions unraveled in front of everyone she tried to control. A few neighbors approached me quietly. Good on you, Gavin. Someone needed to stand up to her. About time she learned she can't bully everyone. Even the sheriff gave me a nod, not of approval for revenge, but of understanding. A recognition that sometimes the only language a bully understands is the one they write for themselves. When the tow truck driver finally told Clara they'd need heavy machinery the next day, she broke her voice, cracking, her composure collapsing. How could this happen, she whispered, but I knew exactly how. She crossed a line that wasn't just painted on the ground, it was carved into generations of my family's history. And that line wasn't hers to move. I walked home to the quiet rustle of fields, settling under the evening breeze, knowing something fundamental had shifted, not just for me, but for the entire community. 2 days later, the county issued its decision. After reviewing Clara's complaints, videos, notes, and false reports, plus the sheriff's documentation of her trespassing, they delivered a verdict she never expected. Clara Patterson was suspended as HOA president, indefinitely. Her own board voted unanimously, not out of spite, but because they'd seen how far she was willing to go. Shortly after, the county mailed me a formal apology for the wrongful towing of my equipment. Fees refunded, record corrected, and Clara, she was hit with citations for trespassing, misuse of HOA authority, and obstruction of agricultural operations. Each fine stung her, but what came next? Cut deeper. Insurance refused to cover damage to her car because the car wasn't damaged by vandalism. It was owner negligence on restricted property. Her repair bill rivaled a down payment on a house. Meanwhile, Clara's reputation in the neighborhood dissolved overnight. The woman who once barked orders at homeowners now avoided eye contact at the grocery store. The confidence she weaponized had evaporated completely. The county even held a meeting to discuss new guidelines restricting HOA authority over agricultural properties. My case became the example. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It was accountability. And, in a strange way, closure. But fate wasn't done with Clara yet. 3 weeks later, something strange happened. A group of local reporters showed up, not for me, but for the field where Clara's luxury car had sunk like a shipwreck. The grass had grown thicker there, darker, and richer than anywhere else in my fields. The soil amendments used to clean up after the extraction had accidentally created the most fertile patch on my entire property, a quiet miracle. Neighbors joked about turning it into a landmark, the spot where karma grew corn. Clara tried to avoid the attention, but life has a way of circling back. Her downfall became local folklore, a warning about pride, power, and parking where you shouldn't. As for me, I kept farming. The season went better than I expected. I hit my planting window after all. My yields improved. The stress that had once lived in my shoulders finally melted away. One evening, as I leaned on the fence, watching the sun dip behind the horizon, I realized the truth. Clara didn't just try to take my tractor. She tried to take my peace. And somehow, through all the chaos, I ended up with more of it. Sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms or committees. Sometimes it rises straight from the dirt under your boots. As the wind rustled, the tall corn where her car once sat, I smiled. Farm country remembers. And it protects its own.